The stars twinkled silently in the vast emptiness of space as the Earth ship Valiant slowed from its jump. Commander Susan Wright stood on the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back as she stared at the massive space station that served as the diplomatic hub of the Juridian Galactic Empire. The station looked like a giant metal flower with 8 petal-shaped docks extending from a central sphere. Lights glowed from countless windows, and smaller ships moved around it like busy insects. "Quite a sight, isn't it?" said Lieutenant Peter Cole from his station at navigation. "Certainly makes our orbital platforms look like toys," Susan replied. She took a deep breath. This was humanity's big moment, first official contact with the galactic community. The fact that Earth had been invited at all was considered a miracle. Their faster-than-light technology was barely 10 years old, while the Empire had been traveling the stars for 10,000 years. "We're receiving docking instructions," said Communications Officer Lisa Reeves. "They want us at Petal 3. Susan nodded. "Take us in nice and slow. Let's not give them any reason to think we're reckless primitives." As the ship moved closer to the station, Susan felt a knot in her stomach. She had been chosen to lead this mission because of her background in both military strategy and xenolinguistics. 6 months of preparation had led to this moment, but nothing could truly prepare humanity for its first steps into a galactic society. The ship docked with barely a bump. "Perfect approach, Lieutenant," Susan said with an approving nod to Cole. "Opening communication channels," Lisa announced. "They're sending a welcome message and instructions for atmospheric composition in the meeting chamber. Send them our data. Our research shows we should be compatible with their standard air mix," Susan replied. She turned to her second-in-command, Jack Wilson. "Jack, you have the bridge. Dr. Harris, Ambassador Reynolds, with me." The 3 humans walked through the ship to the airlock. Dr. Diane Harris, Earth's leading xenobiologist, checked her tablet one last time. "Remember, try not to show your teeth when smiling. For many species, it's seen as a threat display." Ambassador Kevin Reynolds adjusted his formal uniform. "And be prepared for anything. Their concept of diplomacy might be very different from ours." They stepped through the airlock and were greeted by a long, curved hallway with walls that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. A tall, thin figure waited for them. The alien had pale blue skin that looked almost translucent, 6-fingered, hands and large almond-shaped eyes that blinked sideways. It wore robes that flowed like liquid metal. "I am Zelthorn, 3rd Secretary to the Imperial Regent," the alien said in perfect English. "You will follow me to the greeting chamber." Susan nodded, careful not to show her teeth. "Thank you for your welcome. We are honored to be here." Zelthorn made a gesture that might have been dismissive. "The Empire welcomes all emerging species. It is the way of things." Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked down the hallway. As they followed, Susan noticed other aliens watching them from side passages. Some looked almost human, while others were so strange she could barely comprehend their forms. She caught whispers in languages her translator couldn't pick up, but their tones seemed surprised, amused, or even concerned. The greeting chamber was a large, circular room with a raised platform in the center. Around the edges stood representatives from what Susan guessed were at least 30 different species. Some wore elaborate clothing, others had no clothing at all, and a few were contained in special environmental suits. On the platform sat a being that could only be the Imperial Regent. Supreme Lord Vexthalor was larger than the other members of his species, with skin that had a golden tint rather than blue. He wore a crown-like device that pulsed with inner light. "Approach," Vexthalor said, his voice somehow echoing despite the room's design. Susan, Kevin, and Diane walked forward and stopped at the base of the platform. "The humans of Earth," Vexthalor announced to the chamber, "the newest discovered species in the galactic community." He looked down at them with an expression Susan couldn't read. "You have developed faster than light travel remarkably quickly for such young beings." Kevin stepped forward. "Thank you, Supreme Lord. We are eager to learn from the Empire and contribute to galactic society." A sound like rustling leaves moved. Through the chamber, Susan realized it was laughter. "Contribute?" Vexthalor said. "What could your species possibly contribute? Your technology is primitive. Your understanding of cosmic principles is rudimentary and your physical forms are unremarkable. Susan felt her face grow hot, but she kept her expression neutral. Kevin continued smoothly. Every species has unique perspectives to offer. We bring creativity, adaptability, and yes, Vex Thalor interrupted. The standard claims of all new species. You will find your place in the Empire, as all eventually do. You will be assigned a development category and given appropriate resources and restrictions. Restrictions? Susan asked before she could stop herself. Vex Thalor's eyes fixed on her. Of course. Primitive species cannot be allowed free access to advanced technologies or unrestricted travel. It would be dangerous, mostly to yourselves, but occasionally to others. Ambassador Reynolds stepped in smoothly. We look forward to discussing the details of Earth's integration into the galactic community. We've prepared several proposals. There is nothing to discuss, Vex Thalor said. The Empire has managed the development of thousands of species over many millennia. The process is well established. A new alien approached the platform. This one had rigid plate-like skin and moved with a military bearing. Supreme Lord, we have analyzed the human vessel. Their weapon systems are crude but show concerning innovations. Their approach to spatial mechanics is unorthodox. Vex Thalor's expression changed. Interesting. Perhaps there is more to these humans than is immediately apparent. He leaned forward. Tell me, humans, the small colony you have established on the fourth planet of your system, Mars, you call it? What is its purpose? Susan exchanged a quick glance with Kevin. Mars is our first off-world settlement. It's primarily research-focused, with about 60,000 people living there now. Research into what? Vex Thalor pressed. Various fields, Dr. Harris answered. Geology, agriculture in non-Earth environments, early terraforming experiments. And weapons? Vex Thalor interrupted. No, Susan said firmly. Mars is a civilian settlement. Vex Thalor made a gesture, and a holographic display appeared, showing Mars. Another gesture, and the image zoomed in on a particular facility. Then explain this structure, which our scans show contains materials consistent with your primitive nuclear technologies. Susan recognized it immediately. The Mars Power Facility. That's a power plant, not a weapons facility. It provides energy for the colony. Vex Thalor rose from his seat. The Empire has encountered many deceptive species in its history. Some attempt to hide their true nature. Some develop in unexpected and dangerous directions. He looked around. The chamber. The safety of the galactic community is our primary concern. A chill ran down Susan's spine. Supreme Lord, I assure you, this audience is concluded, Vex Thalor announced. The humans will be escorted back to their vessel, while the Council determines the appropriate classification for their species. As they were led from the chamber, Susan whispered to Kevin, This isn't going well. Stay calm. He replied quietly. This might just be how they negotiate, establish dominance, then compromise. But when they returned to their ship, they found it surrounded by Imperial security forces. What's happening? Susan demanded of Zelthorn. A standard quarantine procedure for newly evaluated species, he replied. You will remain docked until the Council reaches its decision. 3 days later, the decision came. As Susan watched in horror on the ship's view screen, a fleet of Imperial vessels appeared near Mars. Without warning or further communication, they opened fire. In just 17 minutes, the Mars colony was gone. The Valiant raced back to Earth, pushing its engines beyond safe limits. Commander Susan Wright had barely slept since their escape from the Imperial station. The images of Mars being destroyed played over and over in her mind. 60,000. People gone in minutes. The Empire had called it a cleansing operation. Approaching Earth orbit, Lieutenant Cole announced, his voice hollow. Everyone on the bridge looked exhausted and shell-shocked. Susan straightened her uniform. Send the priority signal to Earth Defense Command. Make sure they know this isn't a drill. On the view screen, Earth looked peaceful and blue. Susan wondered how long it would stay that way. According to what they had learned, the Empire controlled thousands of worlds across multiple galaxies. Earth was just one small planet with limited technology and resources. When they docked at the orbital station, Susan and her team were immediately escorted to the war room deep beneath Washington, D.C. President Alan Gordon was waiting, along with the Joint Chiefs and representatives from the major world powers. "Commander Wright," the president said, his face grim. "We received your preliminary report. Please tell me there's been some mistake." Susan shook her head. "No mistake, sir. The Empire destroyed Mars without warning or provocation. They classified it as a security operation." The room was silent. For a long moment. "Could this be a misunderstanding?" asked General Laura Peterson, head of Earth Defense. "No," Susan replied firmly. "Before we escaped, I spoke with a lower-level Imperial official. He was quite clear. The Empire decided that humans were developing too quickly and in ways they consider dangerous. The destruction of Mars was meant as a warning." President Gordon ran a hand over his face. "What are our options?" Admiral Gregory Phillips, who had been studying the data from the Valiant, spoke up. "From a military standpoint, we're severely outmatched. The Empire has technology we can barely understand, let alone counter." "Then we surrender?" a Russian representative asked. "No," Susan said, perhaps too quickly. All eyes turned to her. I don't think surrender will save us. The Empire doesn't see us as equals. At best, they'll restrict our development and keep us as a vassal world. At worst..." She didn't need to finish the thought. Everyone understood the implications. Admiral Phillips tapped his tablet, and a hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed an Imperial warship. "While we were held at the station, the Valiant's sensors gathered as much data as possible. I've been analyzing it, and I've found something interesting." He zoomed in on a particular section of the ship. "Their shield technology is incredibly advanced, but it has a specific frequency pattern. If we could create weapons tuned to that exact frequency, we might be able to penetrate their defenses." "Even if that works," General Peterson said, "we have 37 warships. Intel suggests the Empire has thousands." "Then we don't fight fair," Susan said. "We don't challenge them to open battle. We hit and run. We target vulnerable outposts. We steal their technology and adapt it." President Gordon looked around the room. "I need options on the table, people. Not just military. Diplomatic, intelligence, everything." For the next 12 hours, they planned Earth's response. When they emerged, the president addressed the world. He told the truth about Mars, about the Empire, about the threat. There was panic in some places, but mostly there was unity. For the first time in human history, all nations worked together with a single purpose: survival. 3 weeks later, Captain Olivia Martinez stood on the bridge of the battleship Guardian, looking at the small Imperial outpost orbiting Proxima Centauri. Earth had discovered the outpost just months earlier but had kept away as per Imperial regulations. Now it was their first target. "All ships report ready, Captain," said her first officer, Ryan Cooper. Olivia nodded. "Remind all captains, we hit hard and fast, then we're gone before reinforcements arrive. Our priority is capturing at least one Imperial vessel intact." The fleet consisted of just 5 ships. All Earth had been able to spare for this mission. They had been retrofitted with experimental weapons designed by a team led by engineer Paul Winters. The weapons were based on Admiral Phillips's discovery about Imperial shield frequencies. "Begin approach," Olivia ordered. "Activate stealth systems." Another of Paul's inventions, the stealth system wasn't true invisibility, but it disguised their energy signatures to look like common space debris. It wasn't perfect, but it might give them the element of surprise. The Guardian led the small fleet toward the outpost. At 5,000 kilometers, an Imperial patrol ship spotted them. "They're sending a warning signal," Communications Officer Ben Nelson reported. "Jam it," Olivia ordered. "All ships attack pattern Delta." The Earth ships accelerated suddenly, spreading out to attack from multiple angles. The Imperial patrol ship barely had time to raise shields before the Guardian fired its main weapon. a concentrated energy beam tuned to the exact frequency of Imperial shields. The beam cut through the shields like they weren't there. The patrol ship exploded silently in the vacuum of space. "It worked," Ryan exclaimed. "Don't celebrate yet," Olivia said. "Target the outpost's defense systems." The battle lasted 14 minutes. When it was over, the outpost's weapons were destroyed, and the Earth fleet had captured 3 Imperial vessels. One Earthship had been badly damaged, but there were no casualties. "Begin evacuation of the outpost," Olivia ordered. "I want every piece of technology we can carry loaded onto our ships, and get our engineering teams aboard those captured vessels." While the salvage operation continued, Olivia received a transmission from the outpost commander, a blue-skinned Imperial officer. "This is an act of war," the commander said, his translator making his voice sound flat. "The Empire will destroy your world for this." "You already declared war when you destroyed Mars," Olivia replied coldly. "But here's the difference between us. We won't kill your people. They'll be released once we're gone." The commander's expression showed confusion. "You would show mercy, why?" "Because we're not you," Olivia said simply, and cut the transmission. 2 days later, the Earth fleet jumped back to the solar system, bringing with them 3 Imperial ships and a wealth of technology. Engineer Paul Winters and his team immediately began working on understanding and adapting it for human use. Meanwhile, Ambassador Diane Harris had been busy on another front. Through secret channels, she had made contact with representatives of the Creks, a reptilian species that had been under Imperial rule for centuries. The Creks had never been happy with their status in the Empire. "The humans have actually struck against the Empire and survived?" asked Serenthak, the Creks ambassador, during their secure communication. "More than survived," Diane replied. "We captured several of their ships intact." Serenthak was silent for a long moment. "For thousands of years, the Empire has ruled through fear. Many species hate them, but none dare to fight." His reptilian features formed what might have been a smile. "Perhaps it took a species as young and, what was the term they used? Primitive as humans to show us it's possible." "We need allies," Diane said plainly. "We can fight, but not alone." "The Creks have waited a long time for this opportunity," Serenthak replied. "We will help you, and I believe others will join us as well." Back on Earth, the first pieces of Imperial technology were already being integrated into human ships. The first human war had begun, and against all odds, humanity had drawn first blood. 6 months passed since the first human strike against the Empire. Earth had launched 12 more attacks on Imperial outposts, each time capturing more technology and causing confusion among Imperial forces. The Empire, used to being feared, didn't know how to respond to an enemy that refused to fight according to galactic norms. Admiral Samantha Nelson stood on the bridge of the flagship Defender, Earth's first hybrid warship. It combined human engineering with Imperial technology. The ship was twice as fast as any previous Earth vessel and had shields based on captured Imperial designs. "Status report," Samantha said to her crew. "All systems at full capacity," replied Lieutenant Steve Morgan. "The modified shields are stable. Fleet is in formation and awaiting orders." Samantha nodded. Earth now had 25 hybrid ships in addition to the original fleet. It wasn't much compared to the Empire's forces, but every ship was crewed by men and women who knew they were fighting for humanity's survival. "Long-range sensors picking up multiple jumps," called out Sensor Officer Andy Clark. "Imperial signatures, a lot of them." Samantha's stomach tightened. "How many?" "Over 200 ships," Andy replied, his face pale. "Largest force we've seen yet." "They're finally taking us seriously," Samantha said. She opened a channel to the entire fleet. "All ships, battle positions. This is what we've prepared for." Meanwhile, deep in Imperial territory, Commander William Carter led a small team on a covert mission. Their ship looked like an Imperial transport from the outside, a clever disguise created by engineer Paul Winters. Inside were 6 of Earth's best Special Forces operatives. "Approaching Jurid Prime," said pilot Maria Lopez. "Imperial Traffic Control is requesting identification." "Send the codes," William ordered. The codes had been taken from a captured Imperial vessel. They were 6 days old, hopefully still valid. "They've cleared us," Maria said after a tense moment. "We have permission to dock at the outer ring." Jurid Prime was the heart of the Empire, a massive world covered in sprawling cities. The mission was simple but nearly impossible: infiltrate the Imperial Central Database and steal strategic information. As their ship docked, William briefed his team one last time. "Remember, we look like Raxians." The team wore special suits that mimicked the appearance of the Raxians, a species known for their technical skills and loyalty to the Empire. "Keep your heads down, don't speak unless necessary, and let the translator implants do the work." The team moved through the spaceport without incident. Imperial security was tight, but focused on arriving ships, not those already cleared. They boarded a transport to the central data hub, a massive tower in the heart of the capital city. "ID check ahead," whispered Sarah Jones, one of the team members. William nodded calmly. "Proceed as planned." When they reached the checkpoint, William presented falsified credentials identifying them as maintenance workers. The Imperial Guard barely glanced at them before waving them through. "They're so used to being obeyed that they don't expect deception," William observed quietly as they entered a lift. The team reached the 117th floor, where the main data cores were located. Using specialized tools, they bypassed the security and entered the restricted area. They had 20 minutes before the security systems would detect the intrusion. "Start the download," William ordered. "Full-spectrum data search as planned." Sarah connected their devices to the Imperial system and began extracting data. The others stood watch, weapons ready. "Sir," Sarah called after several minutes, "I'm finding something unusual in the restricted files. Medical data about the Imperial ruling caste." William moved to her side. "What kind of medical data?" "Genetic information," Sarah replied. "It looks like they're dying out. Some kind of genetic disorder affecting their reproductive capabilities. According to this, the ruling caste's population has decreased by 60% in the last century." William's eyes widened. "Copy everything, this could be important." They completed the download with 2 minutes to spare and made their way back to the ship. As they prepared to leave Jurid Prime, William contacted Earth using a secure quantum channel that the Empire couldn't detect. "Eagle to nest," he said. "Package secured, plus unexpected bonus. Returning home." Back in the Sol system, the battle had begun. The Imperial fleet emerged from hyperspace in waves, their massive ships dwarfing Earth's defenders. "They're deploying in standard Imperial formation," reported Tactical Officer June Wilson. "Predictable, at least." "That's their weakness," Samantha replied. "They haven't needed to innovate in thousands of years. Execute Defense Plan Delta." Earth's ships began moving in patterns the Empire had never seen before, breaking into smaller groups, attacking from multiple angles. The hybrid ships used their modified shields, which cycled through frequencies to match Imperial weapons. "Shield cycling is working," Steve reported. "Their weapons are only hitting at 20% effectiveness. But there were so many Imperial ships. Even with reduced effectiveness, their weapons were taking a toll. 3 Earth ships had already been destroyed." "They're targeting Earth directly," June called out. "Multiple ships breaking through our lines." Samantha made a quick decision. "Deploy the Nova weapons." The Nova weapons were Earth's newest innovation, based on Imperial technology, but modified by scientist Kelly Robinson. They emitted an energy pulse that disrupted the neural patterns of the Imperial ruling caste, rendering them temporarily unconscious. The weapons fired, sending waves of energy through the Imperial fleet. On dozens of Imperial ships, the commanding officers collapsed, leaving confused subordinates to take control. "It's working," June said excitedly. "Imperial fleet coordination is breaking down." But the Empire was still powerful. Several ships reached Earth orbit and launched attacks on major cities. New York, Beijing, Cairo, and 8 other cities suffered devastating hits. Millions died in the first hour. The battle raged for 3 days. Earth's defenses were strained to the breaking point. But the Imperial forces had never faced an enemy that refused to surrender, that kept fighting even when victory seemed impossible. On the third day, something unexpected happened. A new fleet arrived, but not Imperial ships. These were ships of the Kreks and 3 other species that had joined the human cause. "This is Kreks Commander Vashar," came a transmission to the Defender. "We stand with Earth against the Empire." With the addition of these new allies, the tide turned. The Imperial fleet, already confused by human tactics and the Nova weapons, began to retreat. When the battle was over, Earth had suffered terribly. 11 major cities destroyed, millions dead, much of the orbital infrastructure damaged, but the Imperial invasion had failed, the first time in the Empire's history that they had lost a major battle. As the fleet regrouped, Samantha received a transmission from Earth Defense Command. William Carter had returned with his team, and the data they had stolen was being analyzed. "The Empire has a secret," the message read. "Their ruling caste is dying out. They're not as strong as they want everyone to believe." Samantha looked out at the stars, thinking about what this meant. The Empire wasn't invincible after all. They had weaknesses, secrets, fears. "Send a message to all ships," she ordered. "The Empire can be beaten. Today proved it. Now we take the fight to them." Across the galaxy, news of the Empire's defeat spread like wildfire. Species that had been subjugated for millennia began to think about resistance. The first human war had become something bigger, the first true challenge to Imperial rule in thousands of years. 2 years into the war, the once mighty Ziridian Empire was breaking apart. After their failed attack on Earth, uprisings had erupted on dozens of worlds. 7 formerly subjugated species had joined with humans to form the Alliance, pooling their resources and knowledge against their common enemy. Admiral John Russell, a veteran of the Battle of Earth, now commanded the Alliance fleet. His flagship, the Liberty, was the most advanced vessel humans had ever built, combining technologies from all the Alliance species. At 53, John had never expected to lead an interstellar war fleet, but fate had other plans. "Status report on the Centauri offensive," John requested as he entered the bridge. His second-in-command, Captain Heather Mills, brought up a holographic display. "The Imperial forces are retreating from all 3 star systems. Our allies on Proxima Fortor have seized control of the Imperial base there." John nodded with satisfaction. "And the civilian populations?" "Minimal casualties," Heather replied. "We followed the containment protocols exactly. Most of the Imperial military forces surrendered when they realized they were cut off from Central Command. This had become the Alliance's standard approach. Isolate Imperial forces, offer them surrender terms, and minimize harm to civilian populations. It was a stark contrast to Imperial tactics, which grew more brutal as their situation became more desperate. "Message from Alliance Command," announced Communications Officer Eric Foster. "Priority 1. John moved to a private terminal to receive the message. President Alan Gordon's face appeared on the screen, looking tired but determined. "Admiral Russell," he began, "our intelligence division has discovered something disturbing. The Empire is gathering a massive fleet in the Rigel system. We believe they're planning to deploy a new weapon, something they call a Star Killer." John felt a chill. "What exactly does this weapon do, sir?" "According to the data, it can trigger a premature nova in a star," Gordon replied grimly. "They're planning to use it on our sun." John's mind raced. Such a weapon would destroy not just Earth, but the entire solar system. "Do we know when they plan to deploy it?" "Intelligence suggests within the next 30 days. This is a desperate move, Admiral. The Empire is losing the war and they know it." "I'll gather the fleet immediately," John said. "We'll stop them." After the communication ended, John called his senior officers for an emergency meeting. As they assembled in the strategy room, he explained the situation. "This is the Empire's last gambit," he concluded. "They can't defeat us conventionally anymore, so they're resorting to this." "How do we counter a weapon that can destroy a star?" asked Captain Frank Morris of the advanced destroyer Defiance. Frank was younger than most captains, only 34, but had proven himself in multiple engagements. "We stop it before it reaches our system," John replied. We'll deploy the entire fleet to Rigel and engage them there. Planning continued through the night. The alliance had grown strong, but this would be their greatest challenge yet. Every available ship was called in, nearly 300 vessels from Earth and their allies. Meanwhile, on the political front, the Galactic Council was in turmoil. For millennia, it had been controlled by the Empire, a puppet organization that gave the appearance of shared governance while actually enforcing imperial will. But with the Empire weakening, many council members were asserting independence. Ambassador Diane Harris represented Earth in an emergency council session. The chamber was filled with representatives from hundreds of worlds, many speaking openly against the Empire for the first time. The Empire claims to protect galactic civilization, Diane said, addressing the council. Yet they now plan to use a weapon that could destabilize an entire star system. This threatens not just Earth, but the principle that advanced technology must be used responsibly. The Imperial representative, still from the blue-skinned ruling caste, stood in response. The humans and their allies have disrupted the peace that has lasted for millennia. Regrettable measures are sometimes necessary to restore order. Peace? Diane questioned. Or submission? The Empire destroyed an Earth colony without provocation. You've deployed planet-killer weapons against your own rebelling worlds. Is this the order you wish to restore? The debate raged for hours, but it was clear the Empire's influence was waning. By session's end, 27 more worlds had pledged support to the Alliance. As the Galactic Council debated, the Alliance fleet assembled near the Rigel system. Long-range sensors confirmed their worst fears. The Imperial fleet protecting the Starkiller weapon was massive, over 500 ships. Admiral Russell addressed the fleet before battle. We fight today not just for Earth, but for all worlds threatened by Imperial tyranny. Remember, our goal is to destroy the weapon. Engage the Imperial ships only as necessary to reach that objective. The battle began with the Alliance fleet dropping out of hyperspace in attack formation. Unlike previous Imperial encounters, this Imperial fleet was ready, their formation designed specifically to counter Alliance tactics. They're learning, Captain Heather Mills observed grimly. Good, John replied. It means they respect us as opponents now. The space around Rigel lit up with weapons fire. Alliance ships darted between larger Imperial vessels, using their superior maneuverability to avoid direct confrontations with the largest Imperial dreadnoughts. Captain Frank Morris and the Defiance led a strike team of smaller, faster ships through a gap in the Imperial lines, heading directly for the massive structure that intelligence had identified as the Starkiller weapon. We're taking heavy fire, Frank reported as his ship shook from a near miss. 2 ships lost already, but we're getting closer. The Defiance pushed forward, its shields failing as it absorbed hit after hit from Imperial weapons. Frank knew they wouldn't get a second chance at this. Behind him, 3 more Alliance ships exploded as they drew fire away from the Defiance. Weapon range in 30 seconds, his weapons officer called out. On the main Alliance flagship, Admiral Russell watched the operation unfold. All ships concentrate fire on the Imperial vessels targeting the Defiance. Give Captain Morris the time he needs. Frank's ship was barely holding together now. Half his systems were offline, and his engineering officer reported that the main midi drive would fail within minutes, but they were almost in position. Weapon locked on target, the weapons officer reported. Frank opened a channel to the fleet. This is Morris, we're in position, but our weapons are at reduced power. Not sure if they'll penetrate the target's shields. There was only one option left. Frank made the decision instantly. All crew to escape pods, he ordered. Set the ship to collide with the target. As his crew evacuated, Frank stayed at the helm, manually piloting the crippled ship toward the Starkiller weapon. Imperial fire intensified as they realized his intent. Tell Earth we kept our promise, Frank said in his final transmission. The stars remain ours. The Defiance slammed into the Starkiller weapon at near light speed. The resulting explosion tore through both structures, setting off a chain reaction in the weapon's power core. The Starkiller weapon detonated in a blinding flash that consumed dozens of nearby Imperial ships. When the light faded, both the weapon and the Defiance were gone. Captain Frank Morris and his remaining crew had sacrificed themselves to save not just Earth, but potentially countless other worlds. The Imperial fleet, faced with the destruction of their superweapon and the determined Alliance forces, began to retreat. For the first time, Admiral Russell gave the order to pursue. The time for defensive warfare was over. The Alliance would now take the fight directly to the Empire's core worlds. As news of the victory spread, the Galactic Council voted to formally recognize the Alliance as a legitimate government, separate from the Empire. The balance of power had shifted irreversibly. On Earth, President Gordon addressed the United Planets Assembly. Today we mourn those who gave their lives to protect not just humanity, but all free peoples of the galaxy. And we renew our commitment. We will not rest until the Empire's threat is ended forever. The final battle for Jurid Prime, the heart of the Empire, began 3 years after the destruction of Mars. The Alliance fleet, now over 500 ships strong, emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. At the center of the fleet was the flagship Unity, commanded by Admiral Gregory Phillips, the man who had first discovered the Empire's shield weakness. "All ships report ready, Admiral," said his second-in-command, Captain Ruth Davis. Gregory nodded. He was 60 years old now, his hair completely gray. When the war began, he had been just one admiral in Earth's small fleet. Now he commanded ships from 12 different species, united against Imperial tyranny. "Send the message to all ships," he ordered. "Today we end this war." On the view screen, Jurid Prime loomed large, a world of sprawling cities and massive orbital structures. Defending it was the last great Imperial fleet, nearly 700 ships. The Empire had pulled forces from across the galaxy in a final attempt to protect their capital. "They're moving to engage," Ruth reported. "Standard Imperial formation." Gregory allowed himself a small smile. Even now at the end, the Empire clung to its old ways. "Execute Attack Plan Omega." The Alliance fleet split into smaller groups, using tactics developed over years of fighting. They had learned the Empire's weaknesses, studied their responses, and adapted accordingly. The Imperial fleet, despite its size, was predictable. Meanwhile, on the surface of Jurid Prime, Supreme Lord Vexith Thalor watched the battle unfold from his palace. For 10,000 years, the blue-skinned ruling caste had controlled the galaxy. Now their empire was crumbling around them. "The rebel fleet is breaking through our outer defenses," reported his military advisor. "Deploy all remaining forces," Vex Thalor ordered. "This world must not fall." Back in space, the battle raged across the Jurid system. Imperial and Alliance ships fired at each other, explosions lighting up the darkness. Despite being outnumbered, the Alliance forces were gaining the upper hand, their innovative tactics confusing the Imperial commanders. "Admiral," Ruth called out, "the Imperial flagship has been identified. It's trying to break orbit." Gregory studied the tactical display. "They're running. Vex Thalor is trying to escape." He made a quick decision. "Intercept course. I want that ship." The Unity changed course, pursuing the fleeing Imperial flagship. 3 Alliance cruisers joined the chase, their weapons targeting the Imperial ship's engines. "They're disabled," Ruth reported after several minutes of pursuit. "Their shields are down." "Prepare a boarding party," Gregory ordered. "I want Vexith Thalor alive." As the boarding party prepared, Gregory received word that Alliance forces had broken through to the planet's surface. The Imperial Palace was under attack, and resistance was crumbling throughout the capital city. 2 hours later, Supreme Lord Vex Thalor was brought to the Unity's bridge in restraints. The once proud ruler of the galaxy looked smaller than Gregory had expected, his blue skin pale and his eyes downcast. "The Empire is finished," Gregory told him simply. "Your forces are surrendering across the galaxy." Vexith Thalor finally looked up, his expression unreadable. "You cannot comprehend what you have done. For 10,000 years we maintained order in the galaxy. Without us there will be chaos." "Not order," Gregory replied. "Control. There's a difference." Later that day, on the steps of the Imperial Palace, representatives from all Alliance species gathered to witness the formal surrender. Admiral Phillips signed for Earth along with ambassadors from the 11 other founding members of the Alliance. "What will happen to me?" Vex Thalor asked after the ceremony. "Execution?" Gregory shook his head. "No, that's not our way. You'll stand trial for your crimes, including the destruction of Mars. Justice, not revenge." Vex Thalor seemed confused by this concept. "If our positions were reversed, we would have exterminated your entire species, and that," Gregory said, "is why we won." In the weeks that followed, the galaxy began to adjust to life without Imperial rule. The Galactic Council, once a puppet of the Empire, became a true governing body with representatives from all worlds, large and small. The first free election in millennia resulted in a diverse leadership council, with Ambassador Diane Harris chosen to represent Earth. On a balcony overlooking the capital city, now being transformed from an Imperial stronghold to a center of galactic cooperation, Gregory stood with Susan Wright. She had been promoted to Fleet Admiral after the war, responsible for overseeing the new Alliance defense forces. "Did you ever think we'd end up here when you first met the Empire?" Gregory asked her. Susan shook her head. "Never. I thought we were doomed. One small planet against a galactic empire. What saved us, do you think?" Susan considered the question. "They underestimated us. They thought because we were technologically behind, we were inferior in all ways. They never understood human determination. Or adaptation," Gregory added. "We've always been good at taking new ideas and improving them. The genetic treatments are working, by the way," Susan said, changing the subject. "The Empire's ruling caste won't die out after all. Our medical teams found a way to repair the genetic damage." Gregory nodded. "Good. Saving them despite what they did to us proves we're better than they were." 10 years after the war ended, the galaxy had changed dramatically. Earth, once considered a primitive backwater, was now a leading member of the Galactic Alliance. Humans could be found throughout the galaxy, working alongside other species, sharing ideas and technologies. At the New Earth University, Professor Henry Young completed his famous analysis of the First Human War. His conclusion became required reading for students of history across the galaxy. The Empire had superior technology, numbers, and resources. Humans had only one advantage. They had faced existential threats throughout their history and never accepted defeat as inevitable. When told to run, they charged instead. At a peace conference marking the 10th anniversary of the war's end, Admiral Susan Wright met a young Juridian diplomat. Unlike the older generation, he had grown up in the post-imperial galaxy and had studied on Earth. "My people still don't fully understand how you defeated us," he admitted to her. "We had ruled for 10,000 years. You had barely reached the stars." Susan smiled. "That was your mistake. When faced with overwhelming odds, your people's only advice was to run. Humans have a different response to impossible situations. We fight harder." As the former imperial worlds integrated into the new galactic community, one phrase entered the lexicon of all spacefaring species. It was a warning passed whenever someone suggested underestimating the inhabitants of Earth. Remember the First Human War? And across the stars they did remember. They remembered how a single planet had challenged an empire of thousands of worlds and won. They remembered how humans had turned superior technology against its makers. But most importantly, they remembered that the victory had not led to a new empire but to a community of equals. The stars, as Captain Frank Morris had promised in his final message, remained free.